The Boulder Class. These dragons are tough and are associated with the earth. They can eat rocks or other minerals, which can be melted into their stomachs and regurgitated as a lava blast. They often have small wings with large rounded bodies. Despite this, they are able to keep up with most other dragons, and they aren't picky eaters. So the last class, the Boulder Class. This is going to be fun. Today we're going to be looking at these specific set of dragons to see whether or not they are Boulder or not. First, we're looking at the Rock Eaters. Dragons in this category are predominantly classed as Boulder because they eat rocks or other minerals, which either produces their firepower or is just a nice snack. Starting with the face of the Boulder class, the Gronckle. These dragons love to eat many types of rocks, consuming them and regurgitating them as a lava blast. Their stomachs contain lava, which melts the rocks they eat, which is how they are able to produce their firepower. However, they do actually have a couple of types of fire. One is just spitting the rock straight away with the heptane and oxygen to make a fiery shot. This can be launched in quick succession after gathering the rocks. Or a more powerful but slower is the lava spew, needing to actually consume the rocks and wait for them to be melted down. Outside of their firepower, this ability is very useful, as this is how Vikings make Gronckle iron and other combinations of minerals for various metals, like the time they had to combine Gronckle iron and Deathsong amber to plug up the holes in the ground to stop the volcano erupting. I feel like that would just make more pressure. Anyway, and of course, in order to eat the rocks, they need to have powerful jaws. Moving on, there's little known about this ability, but they can shoot off their bumps along their body. Because we don't see this, I imagine it can leave the dragon quite vulnerable, as it strips all their armor off, and it could hurt the animal. I can see it being used as a last resort, especially if it's surrounded, but this ability wouldn't really be necessary, as they have lots of other methods for combat. They are quite notably strong, and have tough exteriors. Dagger and Shattermaster were good examples of how durable these dragons are, as the amount of times they just crash into boats, even one's aligned with metal, and he just shrugged it off as if it was nothing. Their tails have been used multiple times to bludgeon enemies, and poke holes through ships. I told you these two are nuts! But these dragons are quite sociable. You usually would have to deal with a few of these at one time, but that's more of a social strength. Adding on to their physical toughness though, they have an immunity to dragon root, and an extra resistance to heat, as they are one of the few dragons that can navigate through a lavary landscape. Their stature is seen as typical of dragons in the Boulder class. Rounded, thick hides and small wings, which does make them the slowest out of all the dragons, but hard to deal with physically. Despite this, they do have some very interesting ways around their limitations. Because their movements are like bumblebees, or even hummingbirds, they have a unique ability to hover and move in any direction from one spot, helping them easily move through their surroundings like small caves. They can circle up and drop and steady themselves quickly, making them some of the fastest dragons to descend. And despite their slow speeds whilst flying, this doesn't equate to them running on land, as they are surprisingly fast. Groncles are seen as easy to train and lovable once you get to know them, but if you upset them, they can have a very nasty attitude, so be careful. Because of all these factors, I believe Groncles are a prime example of what Boulder Class Dragons are, and a good reference point for the upcoming dragons in this video. Here we have the larger, lazier cousin of the Gronckle, the Hotburple. Known as the garbage eaters of the dragon world, this species scoops up any rocks, metal and scrap lying around. For this job they have incredible draw strength, even having the ability to crush dragon-proof metal bars. Their firepower is identical to before, spitting the rocks and metal back out into balls of molten lava. They have defensive armor along their bodies, and being incredibly strong knocking down enemies, these dragons do possess quite a lot of strength, especially as they're known to easily escape from their pens. These guys do have a dangerous side, especially if you upset them, as they have a fearsome furiosity. Apparently they have striking parallels with that of a Night Fury.
I feel like I'm always asking you this question, but wake up!
As you can see, the thing that holds them back is their sleeping habits, as it could be tricky to train these creatures just due to them not being awake long enough. Like Groncles, these little guys have small wings and possess round, tough bods, not being known for their speed in flight. But hey, it did pretty well keeping up the Skull Crusher, so who am I to judge? I think it's quite clear that these guys are Boulder.
Oh, give me a cuddle, Grumpy!
So, from Burke's Forges to Burke's Builders, The Shovelhelm. These dragons are most well known for being incredibly effective at assisting Vikings in building structures. Is that how Bert grew so quickly? All on the backs of the Shovelhelms? Oh. Having a pointed chin, they use it to shovel out dirt, perfect for Bert's construction. There's even an individual called Damsel, who has a strange affinity with the water, who helps with seaside construction. Like other Boulder classes, they are stocky and defensive, and prefer staying back to assess the situation before going in. They too like to eat rocks, although this isn't used for their firepower, as it's just a generic stream of fire, but perhaps it's just an extra nutrients thing, as these guys are hard workers and definitely need it. They always seem to be getting involved, and go out their way to help others, so as these dragons have some of the highest strength out of all dragons, I believe these guys are defo Boulder class. The Catastrophic Quaken. These guys are cool and very clearly Boulder, especially as they could basically turn into one, but I'm going to explain them nevertheless. These chads also eat rocks and minerals, but it isn't confirmed that they use it for their firepower, or can they just shoot magma slobber anyway? Either way, it doesn't really matter. They have split jaws as well, which is very interesting. Perhaps it helps them chew through some of the toughest rocks. Quakens are incredibly tough, having some of the thickest hides, either withstanding dragon blasts or smashing into rocks, cliffs, gold, or other earthly things. They were even able to smash through solid marble, where it was resisted by any other attempts from the dragon riders. These dragons are great for mining, as they can circle up into balls and can smash into the ground for great defensive power, creating shockwaves that can knock down dragons from the sky. These dragons are aggressive, as they are territorial and are solitary. However, this is a little misnomer, as they can and do have interspecies relationships with Gronckles. The Quakens crack the larger rocks, and the Groncles eat up the pebbles. Once thought as a difficult dragon to train, they like to communicate through vibrations, which is the key method to get their attention and to respond to you. I can imagine this is how they communicate with others of the species across the island, as their behaviour of attacking and hunting is through smacking the earth. So definitely Boulder class. So what about the volcanic dragon, the Eruptodon? This one's another one that are quite like the other Boulder classes, but turned up to 11. Instead of rocks, these dragons like to eat molten lava in active volcanoes. As a result of this, they have increased resistance to the extreme heat. Oh, look at it having a lava bath, it's so cute. So much so that their eggs need to be engulfed into lava to live. It's clear just from the look of them that they are Boulder, as well as being round, very tough and having stone-like scales. They can tunnel through mountains of dormant volcanoes to make them erupt if they are starving. The dragon emits enough body heat to boil water around them, and some are even immune to radioactive rocks. And of course, being those of the Boulder class, they are very strong, lifting heavy things, like that diving bell. Oh, and how can I forget about their firepower? They spit out molten balls of lava from their diet, cooling down into hot rocks. So with all these abilities, it's clear that these are Boulder classes, with some Stoker in there, which is interesting. Last in this category is the Snafflefang. It's said that these dragons have diamond-sharp teeth, loving to gnaw on geodes the same way dogs are to bones. According to the World of Dragons, their fire contains flecked crystals, suggesting that the geodes they eat could form their fire, or it's just an addition to it. Imagine a flame, but then you get hit with thousands of tiny shards at the same time. Ouch. Also, they have a mace at the end of their tail, full of spikes, and horns on their face. So if you manage to avoid their fire, you'll need to contend with them as well. Much like other dragons of the Boulder class, they have a similar stocky structure and great strength, often forgetting that whilst playing with other dragons. So despite being more active and lively compared to their Boulder counterparts, they are clearly Boulder class dragons. Second, we're looking at the rock-likes. Dragons in this category, despite not eating rocks, have rocky or earthly features as a part of their body or behaviours, like the Sentinel dragons. First appearing on Vanaheim, with their main job to protect and maintain the grave sites of the dragons, or guard the alphas. These dragons are like bodyguards, and thus needs to be some of the toughest dragons in existence. Their stone-like scales provide excellent protection against many attacks, and if they do get hurt, they could be restored through heat, which is quite unique. This could explain why they remain motionless a lot of the time, primarily during the day, as presumably that's how they gather energy, absorbing the heat of the sun. Though they still eat, either the fruit on the island or fish seen in Riserberg and School of Dragons. so perhaps it's more of a boost or provide healing. Either way, it's an ability that's kind of classless, as well as everything else they have. Their main attack is gusts of wings to push back dragons, or sonic screeches, utilising the common weakness of sound disorientating dragons. They do possess a fire power, but it's just a normal stream of fire. The only other thing interesting about them is they are blind, and they have heightened senses in sound and smell. Sentinel structures aren't like those of other Boulder classes, being more slender and having larger wings, but I believe they still suit the class they're in from their toughness, appearance, and affinity with other Boulder classes, as Meatlog was the one who knew how to restore the Sentinels in the first place. Next is one of my favourite dragons, the Crimson Goregutter. These dragons are some of the largest land-based creatures, covered in rocky osteoderms, making them very tough for most dragons to compete with. Coupled with some of their physical features, they could cause lots of destruction, but they are kind giants, so it would tend to be an accident. So yeah, at the tip of their tail is an axe-shaped feature, which could be used as an offensive tool. We don't know if they use it like Sharp Class Dragons to cut down objects, but I can see that as a possibility. And one of the most prominent attributes is their metallic moose-like antlers, used to smash through objects when needed, or cover their antlers in molten lava before attacking. We don't know if they eat minerals, so the antlers could either resemble metal or form through the help of their diet. Speaking of, these are some of the few dragons that doesn't ingest rocks to spit it back out as fire, but it can still produce a molten lava ball firepower, so mechanically it could be similar, it's just missing some extra fuel, which could also be the reason why it tends to smash through objects then fire, because we don't see it once throughout the movie. And lastly, they have an ear-splitting call, which is classless, but I think it's still worth mentioning. These dragons are so cool, and although they are slightly different from the standard Boulder class, they have a few key features that make them belong in that class. Here we have the very odd dragon, a Thunderpede. This Boulder Class Dragon doesn't have any rocky or earthly features on it, there are some individuals, but its most known ability and behaviour can only be described as fairly Boulder. Using their two strong forearms, they can pulverise any objects in front of them, especially boulders. This proves its strength is equal to its Boulder Class peers, with an emphasis of their combat prowess. A Thunderpede called Stonewall was able to take on an entire fleet of dragon hunters all on her own. Deserved, as they were very homophobic. Golium's description says they can hit the ground and any hunters nearby would stumble to the ground. She also needs to stay away from Burkian houses. If Shovelhelms are the builders of Burke, then these guys are the bulldozers. But as cool as this is, it never goes into why they pulverise rocks. Quakens do it for their meal, but these guys do it to prepare for fights. They're like Rocky of the Dragon world. But why they want to fight is never delved into. So what else contributes to their boulderiness? Well, they have soft belly scales, suggesting their other ones are much tougher. They are a little bit longer, but still rounded in nature, with teeny tiny wings, which rival the size of the Groncles. And apparently these are quite social creatures. They follow a social hierarchy, and they communicate using their forelegs to form gestures or rhythmic stomps to convey emotion. Quite similar to the theories I had about the Catastrophic Quaken. Their flame is just a generic fireball. They are hot enough to melt rocks, so perhaps it's more lava based like other Boulder classes, but once again this dragon doesn't consume rocks in order to produce it. Although going back to what I said at the start, there are some individuals who do look very earthy, with stone-like scales and lava going through them. Though there is a rainbow one as well. He attacks with the full spectrum of smashing power. Didn't know I could use my autism as a smashing power, but here we are. But from the evidence I just provided, this species is Boulder class. Though just about. Lastly, we're tackling this very peculiar dragon, the Groncicle. Instead of rocks, this dragon is all about ice. Every relationship these Boulder classes have with the earth, the Groncicle is identical, but it's with frozen water. They are very similar to Groncles. Stocky, strong, durable, small wings. These dragons are just slightly longer and have more of a tail. They even consume ice to spit it back out, with an extra punch with liquid nitrogen. So, it's just like an anti-Gronckle. And if you want to get technical, naturally occurring ice are technically rocks, if you just stick to the definitions.
Ice is a rock. What the heck else is ice if it's not a rock? I'm on the Wikipedia page. A rock is any naturally occurring solid mass or aggregate of minerals or mineraloid matter. Ice is a rock, as long as it's naturally occurring. The ice in your freezer, not a rock.
Yes, I am sinking this low just to arbitrarily fit this dragon in. Just ignore any other implications this could have on any other dragons. But to be honest, a dragon having an affinity with snow and ice doesn't necessarily mean its tidal class, as Snow Wraith, Shivertooth and some other individuals of Raincutters and Wingnashers exist. But of course, because this dragon lives on icebergs and icy caves, it would have cold resistances. Though a strong argument for it being in tidal is that it does like to hang out in water. However, counter-argument, there are quite a few individuals and other types of Groncicles where you can see more of an earthly undertone to them. It looks like the ice aesthetic is more on top, and possibly their actual skin or scales are more earth-like, very similar to other Boulder classes we've seen, with the extra layer of ice acting as a thermal layer, or just help with camouflage. With this theory being potentially confirmed in the description of an individual called Lovesome Crackle. Sometimes he can keep them in, and they even crack his cold outer shell. However, this also could be seen as a metaphor because this is just a love Groncicle. But I'm fairly confident within this, and thus it fits into this category of rock likes, and that means I think it's Boulder Class. Though just about. It could be a good contender for a dual class. And thirdly, the last category, the not Boulder Class Dragons. The dragons coming up either have features that aren't like other Boulder classes, or abilities more like those in other classes. For example, the Whispering Death. This one is one of the OG Boulder Class Dragons, and was predominantly put into that class because of its burrowing ability. However, over time, burrowing, though still common in Boulder Class, isn't mutually exclusive, as many other dragons from many other classes have this. So now the Whispering Death would need a little bit extra to remain in Boulder, and I don't think it has one. First, let's look at this thing. Sorry, that's my George Michael collection. There we are. I think these dragons are more sharp class than anything else. Look how pointy this thing is. They can use their tail to slice things. They use a spine shot like the Deadly Nadder, though that's not sharp anymore. And the rows and rows of rotating teeth. That's how it tunnels, by the way, grinding the earth to dust to slither through. They don't consume any of it for their firepower, as it's just rings of flames. Albeit cool, but not like those of other Boulder classes. To be fair though, these dragons do love being underground, and surface rarely due to their sensitivity to the light, but they just don't possess earthly features, or aren't exceptionally tougher than other dragons. Don't get me wrong, they can endure quite a lot of stuff, but comparatively speaking to other Boulder classes, meh. They aren't strong either, with quite a few examples of them being flung around. The Whispering Death is so close to being Boulder. If it was able to spit rocks back out, or the spines are more rock or metal-like, then I'll definitely say yeah. With the design being the only thing outside the Boulder norm, with it being long, spiky and slithery. But because it hasn't got any of those, it's hard to be really confident in its placement. Though if the Whispering Death should be sharp, then what about the Screaming Death? The once in every 100 years mutation. This alpha dragon is harder as it has more going for it, with less extremity in the sharp teeth and more emphasis on the toughness. But the Screaming and the Whispering Death should be in the same class, as they're the same species, I think? I don't really know how this mutation things work. There's no real world examples to draw from. It's quite weird. But I would still suggest an argument for sharp class, as it still has the very sharp features and abilities, like the spine shots and the non-boulder-like firepower. Though it has a more rapid fire, fireballs firepower. I wish I was better at writing. It even has a high shot limit like those of the Stoker class. And one of its old weaknesses, light sensitivity, is gone. However, there's still quite a few Boulder things. It still thoroughly enjoys living underground. The tunneling is to its extreme, with the ability to sink entire islands. Other Alpha class dragons are able to destroy entire islands, or smash through them, though this comes from more of their size than anything else. And it's not to this level. Additionally, the Screaming Death scales are very, very tough. Hiccup used them as armor against Dragon Hunter arrows. The dragon resists many blasts in the fight with the riders, and it's described that only the boiling water of the Skuldron can penetrate them. They do have a disorientating scream, which is from their namesake, but that ability is classless. They are very intelligent, speedy, and have high stamina, but this doesn't really help define the class placement. It's equally Boulder and non-Boulder, We need to tie the relationship between the Screaming and the Whispering Death, with, in my opinion, the Whispering Death being slightly more sharp aesthetically, so I guess going along with that makes most sense. And lastly, a dragon that I am much more confident in that it shouldn't be Boulder Class. This is the Grapple Grounder. There is nothing earthly about them. The closest thing we get is Fierce Piercer, who was assigned to the mining operations, but then was moved to Burke's Guard as she was more adept at combat. This is a common through line with all the dragons in this species. Every description indicates how they like to wrestle and are good at fighting. These dragons have snake-like features, often coiling around their victim and squeezing them. They lurk in the dark crevices to pounce on their prey. You would also need to watch out for their horns and arrow-tipped tail, which could cause a lot of harm. Let's look at their firepower. A light blue pulse ball, like a plasma blast. What? There is variety within these shots. The larger ones take more time to produce, move slower, and are more powerful, whilst the smaller ones are easier to launch, quicker, but less powerful, which is similar in function to the Night Furies. Though in Rise of Berk they look like more generic fireballs, and in School of Dragons they're a little bit more yellowish. So, to be honest with you, I don't actually really know what its firepower is. Though in School of Dragons it still states that it's a pulse blast, similar to those of the Night Furies, so I'm just going to go along with that. They are fast and agile, and there is nothing noted about their toughness or strength. Though being great in combat could suggest it could be higher than the average, but that doesn't really mean much, especially for the excuse of them being in Boulder. So if it doesn't belong here, then which class would it go in? I think it should be in Stoker. This mainly stems from their attitudes. They are aggressive and love to fight, which is very common with dragons in that class. Although their fire isn't overly Stoker-like, it's still quite unique and can be interacted with in interesting ways. Like in the How to Train Dragon console game, it can track to their opponents. A tracking fireball, and it contains magnesium gel, which sounds like it has similarities to dragons with the gel-like fire. You know, the ones who are like in the Stoker class. Because of this, at the very least, I don't think the Grapple Grounder is not Boulder Class. So these were the Boulder Class Dragons explained. They are pretty bog standard in how they fit into the class, with some cool variety sprinkled in there. And this is the last not class video in this series, though I do plan on doing one large big video combining all these together, fix some of my mistakes in previous videos, and perhaps talk about some other dragons, now that a certain series is finished. See you next time.